Hi everyone, Mrs. McBain here. Today we're going to be learning about the commutative properties, additive properties, and multiplicative identities. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a list of some questions we have here to solve. So our first one says, give an example of the commutative property of addition using the variables a and b. So let's first figure out, what is a commutative property? Well, it states that with the addition and multiplication of numbers, you can change the order of the numbers in the problem and still have the same answer. So let's go ahead and try that using the variables they've given us of a and b. So let's take a look here at a and b. So what they are saying is that if we took a and added it to b, that's going to equal the exact same as if we took b and added it to a. Now, can we prove that? We sure can. Let's try it with some actual numbers. How about 1 plus 2 equals 3? Okay. And so at the same time, we also know that 2 plus 1 also equals 3. Okay, so that's our commutative property of addition. So let's look at our next question here. It says, give an example of the commutative property of multiplication using the variables a and b. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now remember, we just learned that the commutative property means that no matter which order the numbers or letters are in, that it's going to equal the same. So they want us to use a and b again. So let's go ahead and do it. So we can say a times b is going to equal the same as b times a. Now let's try that out with some numbers. How about 2 times 3? And that's going to equal 6. And at the same time, we also know that 3 times 2 also equals 6. So when we're dealing with the commutative property, no matter which way we put the numbers, it's still going to come up with the exact same answer. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our next one. So our next one here, it says, give an example of the additive property of 0 using variable a. The additive property of 0. So let's figure out first, what is the additive property of 0? So the additive property of 0 is when 0 is added to any number, it does not change the value. So they want us to use variable a. So what they're saying then is that a plus 0 still equals a. And we can prove that using regular numbers as well, rather than letters. So if we said 1 plus 0, well, it's still going to equal 1. So our additive property of 0 means that if we're adding 0 to any set of numbers, it does not change the value. Okay. So question 4 here, it says, give an example of the multiplicative identity property of 1 using variable b. So the multiplicative identity of a real number is 1. This means that when we multiply 1 to any number, the answer is still the number that you started with. So what that is saying is that, let's say, well, they want us to use the variable b. So we're going to say b times 1 equals b. Okay, and we can prove that if we want to use numbers so that we can see it that way as well. So we could say 5 times 1 equals 5. So that's our multiplicative identity of 1. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. All right, so let's take a look at the rest of our questions. And so here we have a table to complete. So here we're going to complete the table for the commutative property of addition, the commutative property of multiplication, the additive property of 0, and the multiplicative identity of 1. Okay, so let's take a look first of the commutative property of addition. So here they're saying 12 plus h. Well, remember the commutative property of addition, that tells us that no matter which direction we put the numbers, no matter what order we put them in, it's still going to be the same. So to complete this table, we would say h plus 12, because that's going to equal the exact same as 12 plus h. Okay, so let's see, what's our next one? It says the commutative property of multiplication. Okay, well, just like we just learned, the commutative property of multiplication is the exact same as the commutative property of addition. So that means that where they have A times B, that also means that B times A is going to equal the exact same thing. Okay, and then we've got our additive property of 0, and they have here m plus 0. So we know that m plus 0 is still going to equal 0. So we can show that here by also saying that 0 plus m is still going to equal m, because no matter what number we are adding to 0, it's still going to be the number that we added first. So remember, 0 doesn't have a value. So if m, let's say, stood for 15, our answer would be 15 if we were adding 0 to it. Okay, so let's take a look at the last one here. They said b times 1 equals, well, we know that b times 1, anything times 1 is going to be the number that we started with. So b times 1, well, that's going to be the same as 1 times b, and that is going to equal b, okay? And we can go ahead and solve some of these up here as well. So 0 plus m, or m plus 0, that's still going to be m, right? Okay, so let's take a look at our last question here. Looks like it could be a tricky one. It says, why isn't there a commutative property for subtraction and division? Well, let's give it a try. So what if we had, let's say, let me grab my division symbol down here. What if we had, how about 8 divided by 2? Well, we know that 8 divided by 2 equals 4. So if this are going to work out for a commutative property, then that should also mean that 2 divided by 8 would also equal 4. But does it? Doesn't look like it does. 2 divided by 8 would be 1/4. Not quite the same thing there, is it? Okay, so what about subtraction? Well, if we were to take 8 minus 2, well, we know that that equals 6. So if there was a commutative property for this, then we would be able to say then that 2 minus 8 would also equal 6, except it doesn't. If you took 8 from the number 2, you'd end up with -6. Okay, so those are your commutative properties, additive properties, and multiplicative identities. So remember, when you are looking at these, your commutative properties state that with the addition and multiplication numbers, now remember, that's not going to be subtraction or division, only with addition and multiplication, you can change the order of the numbers and letters in the problem and still have the same answer. The additive property of 0 is when 0 is added to any number, it does not change its value. The multiplicative identity of any number is 1, which means that when we multiply 1 to any number, the answer is still the number we started with. Okay, and then the last one, there isn't a multiplicative property for addition or subtraction because your answers will never be the same. All right, well, I hope that you have a great day.